We are in session. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Johnston.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney.
Here.
Councilmember Blatz.
Here.
Councilmember Francina.
Here.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Should we hold the pledge till we have the regular meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Approval of the agenda. We have one item. That's the workshop. So is there?
So moved.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. If no objection, the agenda is approved as submitted. Okay, the workshop, review of council protocol revisions. City Manager, do you have anything you want to?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think before, just a couple of introductory comments, and then I'll turn it over to the members of the committee, which was yourself and Mayor Pro Tem Haney. And what we did hand out here is somewhat of a Cliff Note version. The two-sided one-page sheet in front of you that's titled City Council Protocols, Work of the Ad Hoc Committee. And since it's a rather lengthy document, we wanted to, again, provide a little bit of an executive summary here. This is new information. It's all within your packet, but it condenses it down. Again, we wanted to list some of the minor changes right there up there at the top, and then really the committee identified two real significant questions that they wanted the council to discuss. One is the makeup of the council commissions and committees, and the second is about the time, location, and length of the regular meetings. So again, this is a workshop tonight. We're asking for council direction to staff or perhaps back to the committee. And then with that, depending on how council wants to go, we would then come back with some type of formal action if so desired by the council.
Okay, but we could take formal action and adopt with amendments tonight. Is that correct?
No, this is the review of the draft and to provide feedback to staff. I do not believe that that would give us enough latitude to be able to adopt these this evening.
Unfortunately, I think we'd have to come back.
Okay, and is that just because of the way we listed it as opposed to, is this just the bureaucratic way we do everything? Everything has to come back, right?
Well, perhaps it was a misunderstanding. I thought that the purpose was to go through and have the workshop and go through the issues with the
No,
council
no,
and
no,
then
that's fine.
perhaps
I
give
just
direction
was-
back to final formal approval.
Okay, but we didn't have it on a regular agenda. I guess that's the.
That's
the
correct,
catch,
Mr.
yeah.
Mayor,
Okay,
right.
got it. Okay, well, Randy and I met with the clerk and the city manager, and we kind of went through the thing, tried to remove the out of date or the obsolete portions caused by the change in the electing of the mayor. The city attorney also reviewed, went through things. We tried to clarify a few points. The two matters they say that should be brought back to council for guidance. Okay, what do we have here? Question one, the ad hoc committee determined that the process by the council selects and retains commissioners might be a topic for review. Yeah, I'm not sure how much we want to do on that in this setting because it does require some other kind of action. But there were two things that came along and, you jump in wherever you'd like. One, the way we do it, and I know there's a long history of this, but we don't, what is it called, the Maddie Act? What is the, where you advertise so citizens know there's a vacancy and there should be a process. But we've gotten in the habit, and it's not required apparently because other communities don't do it the way we do it. We have the one issue of the size and just kind of streamlining our government. That's not for tonight, but the question of how we go about the interviewing process and appointment. I've heard people say, members of the council say, well, these aren't lifetime appointments. Well, that's true. They're not supposed to be. On the other hand, when we advertise in the paper, we have not had a robust response, I think, Paul, as you recognized when you were doing this. And in some cases, we don't even have enough candidates to fill the open positions. Sometimes it's maybe one open position and two candidates, and certainly an interview is appropriate. But then we have a situation where our incumbents want to be reappointed, and all we have to do is call up YouTube and we can watch the performance of all of them. Plus, we know all of them and have worked with them over the years. And the idea, I guess, by interpretation, I don't know if it's explicit, but the clerk's office we didn't re-interview people this past year for reappointment if they wanted to be reappointed. They just submitted their interest. But to go through the whole process of coordinating and getting people's schedules to interview as though we're going to learn something particularly new to reappoint incumbents seemed to me to be a huge, burden on staff and a waste of time for those of us who have to conduct those things. So, my thought is that maybe there should be some latitude that under a circumstance, if everybody's sort of satisfied with the incumbents and there aren't more applicants than there are positions, that we don't, waste the time. The other thought that came up that we could deal with at a different time in conversations with some members of the council, some members of the commissions, and Bob Daddy were discussing the idea that we could really simplify the process if we had our commissions and boards be a reflection of the council, and they would be a committee or a commission basically the same size as we are, and as people are elected, they would have a choice to reappoint or to hold interviews and appoint somebody else. So, we've had this conversation before, and I would not want to see anybody who's been serving and wants to continue serving be asked to leave. I think that through an attrition process, we could deal with that. So it really gets down to, do we have to go through some kind of ceremonial process of interviewing people that we already know quite well and have a complete track record with us for the same position? It might be different if they were moving up or changing commissions, but to stay in the same place. So I don't know how that language works, Steve, in the protocols, but that would be one thing. I don't know, Randy, what are your feelings on that?
Well, you clearly stated what the thought process was. So I'm saying, to me, there's three things here. First is, how do we deal with existing commissioners? And do we interview them through the standard appointment process? Or do we just roll them over after they've submitted? So that's one. Two is the reduction of the size of the commissions. Mm-hmm. Do we take them from 7 to 5, just as the council is? That's the second thing. And then the third thing is the appointment by council members as they come on board for each election and have the opportunity to appoint new members. So I think those are the three things. So I think if we just identify each one of them and want to discuss each one.
Yeah, okay. There was a fourth thing that I neglected to mention, and that is, what is the effect on getting people to participate when we hold open public interviews with an audience, and under a Brown Act, I guess, if is my understanding, and then in some cases, the people that are supposed to be serving on the interviewing panel are also applicants. In other cases, the people who are competing for the position or potentially could be sitting in the audience and would have a right to. And a lot of people are, happy to do their public service. We don't pay them anything. So to put them through that and then to, be an also-ran and not get the job, I think it discourages people. And people have said that to me. Oh, I tried it once, but, I got passed over. Why would I want to go through that again? So it seems like when we aren't getting a lot of candidates, we might consider changing that methodology. I've been told that was done by a previous council where they thought, I don't know, I guess they did.
Well,
Yeah,
Mayor?
it's been done differently over the years.
Yeah, I thought that was an interpretation.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember interviewing for the Planning Commission, and all of the interviewees were in the audience. And so
And you still got through.
well, I did, but I did not get a position. But more,
Oh, I see.
but more importantly, what I thought was interesting was we're all sitting there being interviewed, and we're all listening to number 1, number 2, number 3, and I'm taking notes.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't understand that process. So if we change anything regarding that process, the interviewer should be in a separate room, and the interviewee should be singled out by himself and interviewed openly, but not having all the other candidates in the same room listening to the questions. So I think that could change if that's one of our issues.
Okay, have the interviews always been open? Because that's not my
No.
recollection.
Yeah, no,
My
they-
recollection is that
all of a sudden, we just had some new commissioners that a couple of council members interviewed and handpicked.
Well, they would bring.
I mean, this was a long
They've
always
always
ago.
been approved by the council.
Well, there had to be-
Yeah, they have to be
There had to
approved
be
by
a
the council.
vacancy and a notice.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And then the interviewing process, which was in the past usually conducted by two council people and the
Yes.
chair of the commission. And they conducted the interview. Most of the interviews mine was done here. Rec and Park was done back here. They weren't filmed, they weren't in the open. But that's changed.
Yeah, yeah.
When did that change?
I think Carlin Strobel introduced it.
Yeah, because I conducted many interviews
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
was mayor back here in the
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
It wasn't out here.
Yeah, I strongly feel that two council members and the head of the commission, unless it's the head of the commission that's somehow being questioned, I'm comfortable to do that privately, and then they bring it to us for approval, right?
Is there any Brown Act violation?
Unfortunately, the current Brown Act doesn't permit a committee that is composed of members of two boards to meet outside of public view. So if if the council wished to have interviews in private and thus the ability to speak frankly, that would have to be just a subcommittee of two members of the council that
I see.
appointed ad hoc as each interview opportunity arose,
And not the commission.
but not the commission chair. That's what makes forces of
That's
public.
what causes the
Right, in some cases, as we know, the chair is a candidate, you know,
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
just seems like
Yeah, I
that we're
realize
appointing
that.
people to advise us.
Yeah, I
So
would
why
say-
are we having the people that
Yeah.
we're appointing, serving and helping make the
I-
Right,
decision?
although I remember when Randy was chairman of Park and Rec, you participated in those interviews.
Right.
And I thought it helped.
But I think that's a possible adjustment, just the two council members. I agree.
Right. And usually it was the mayor and the liaison at the time
Right.
to
Yeah,
that
that-
commission.
Sounds good.
And that way everyone was participating in
That sounds
the
really
process.
good, yeah.
I just, a couple of opinions, just real quick. One is I am, and will always be in favor of going to 5 by attrition at some point. I've never wavered from that. I just think it's a small town, and it would improve the efficiency of meetings, because no matter what anybody says, if you have 7 people, they all feel they have to say something. And so the efficiency of deliberation would be improved by going to 5, plus it would allow, it'd be easier to staff properly, the commissions.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the turnover of the vacancy, I
Right.
would think.
And then the other comment I would make is if there was some way of distinguishing between when there weren't really other applicants other than incumbents, the situation you said I would agree with. But on the other hand, if there are more applicants, wanting to compete with incumbents, I think there may want to distinguish between the two situations. We shouldn't give a special right to an incumbent, is what I'm trying to say, if a number of people were applying.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I guess my feeling is that it's not giving a right so much to them as the fact that it's like interviewing, if you're filling a position and you're having an internal candidate versus someone, on regular staff from someplace else. Whenever you sit down to interview your internal candidate who's been working with you all along, what is really truly accomplished,
Right.
other than giving
And-
the appearance that the thing wasn't wired?
Right.
As
And
as
the
the
other
expression
thing-
goes.
The other thing, Mr. Mayor, is that if you had an opening because one of the incumbents was coming up, so you're interviewing other people, well, we know if the incumbent wants to be reappointed, and we're happy with them, and if we weren't happy with them, we would have gotten rid of them before the opportunity to have them reapply. Then if the incumbent wanted to do it, then there wouldn't be an opening, and you wouldn't have to interview.
Well, I think that's exactly the point.
Right.
Is that the idea is, are we going to have terms, where if the term is up, is it an opening that is open for anyone, or is it going to be, the incumbent basically has an entitlement to continue if they wish? That was the,
Assuming that they're doing a good job.
well, that was the debate, whether we have fixed terms or not for these commissions.
Well, here's one other thing, and I'm sure the mayor will agree with me on it, is when someone's term is up, it gives you political cover to, that's the time if you want to remove somebody, you remove them, versus going through the removal process during their term. So that's all I'm kind of laughing inside about how that works. That's the only benefit of a term is when it's up, you do have a choice at that point in time, whether to bring someone else new in
If
or,
additional people apply.
And we've done that.
yeah.
Right, but it's sort of the gracious way to do it, you know,
Right.
someone's put in good service, a lot of times there's a reason to change, but it has nothing to do with their performance particularly, it's just the time has come, and when their term is up, it is not always easier to leave when your term is up than to be asked to leave early, or someone suspects you were asked to leave early.
Exactly.
And say, why are you doing this, you know?
Can I ask two questions? Has that ever happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's that?
That you've removed people because they weren't?
Mainly for
May-
absent,
Yeah,
excessive absence.
attendance, yeah, poor
For
attendance.
absence.
Or attendance, yeah.
Yeah. And then-
Not always.
Not always.
Okay. And the second question is, if we go to 5, does it have to be for all commissions, or can there be an exception for the planning?
I'd personally,
Yeah.
keep it simple, 5 for all.
But.
I would agree, but you wouldn't have to.
Legally,
you
does,
don't have to.
if.
No, there's no reason to.
It could be a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, legally, it's up to the council to set the size of the commissions. There's no legal bounds. As a practical matter, never pick an even commission, but otherwise, there's no legal bounds.
Okay.
Not 3 and not 4,
I also believe that,
not 6.
Well, now, wait, if we do it through what's the word, attrition? Couldn't we
Attrition.
end up with 6 at some point?
Yeah,
By attrition, you would temporarily have an even commission, as
yeah.
also happens sometimes with vacancies.
Yeah, well, we have that on the
We have that now.
OBGMA, and
Be
that's
like it.
being
Yeah,
resolved
okay,
next
okay.
month, so, but it.
so,
it would-
so there's another, just Mayor, there's one other aspect to it too, and that is, you know, there's so many different committees that meet in this community that there's not a lack of community participation or involvement.
Yeah.
So having commissioners that actually live within our city boundaries, I think is also a benefit to commissions, that they're actually making decisions that impact them. And I think that's a win for the community. So that would be something that I'd be interested in too, is figuring out how to create these commissions in the future with citizens that live in our boundaries, acknowledging that there's a lot of good commissioners right now that live outside of the city that are doing a lot of good things for us. But there's also a lot of other committees that meet that they could actually associate with, so.
Mayor, one of the arguments has been they need people to do working committees and stuff. If you have a 5-person commission, that doesn't prevent bringing other people in for working committees.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
attest to
and
that.
I agree with Randy's
Cultural
comment. It
resources.
seems to me that if there's a reason to have a municipality or a corporation, at least priority should be given to those
Right.
Right,
who,
within it.
you know, are members or.
Well, I'm going to be the one that disagrees with that, because if you have an outstanding person that lives just a few feet outside, the boundaries are so outdated and so, what's the word, in some cases random, that I would not be in favor of making that a hard qualification that they have to be in the city.
How about as a
Because-
priority?
It could be one of many factors that we look at. If they qualify in other respects and they live in the city, all the better. But I wouldn't make that the deciding factor, just because of the number of talented people that come to the podium and that work for the greater good. You know, they're scattered all over the Ojai Valley.
Oh, you could say the same thing for the council. You only live
I'd like to.
100 feet outside the
I'd
city
like
limit.
to.
Yeah, well,
Then
I
would-
wouldn't.
No,
Why be
I
a
think-
city then? you know?
No, I think the council is different because we're lawmakers. It's different.
I think we should have the flexibility, but within guidelines, and that preference should be given to people who live in,
in the city.
help
If
pay
they're
the bill.
qualified.
But, that there are times, the city has always had some exception, back when we had an architectural review board, before they merged the two. You don't necessarily have all architects living in the city. I think we do have now, but a lot of times, in order to have an architect on the board or someone with specialized training, you had to broaden the field. You're just saying that this is sort of the same thing, only it wouldn't necessarily be special credentials, just that they're good people that live close by and have an interest. But anyway, that was I guess the part that I would hope we would deal with tonight, for the guidance to the clerk's office and to me, is to I think Randy said he thought maybe it was an interpretation, but the interviewing process, I know that we have Brown Act, we have those requirements, so we can stay with that, but the idea of re-interviewing, 4 people or 5 people that we know, I mean, if the interviewers felt like we needed to, that would be one thing, but otherwise, I think waive it and give the incumbents at least the benefit of,
Yeah.
I
And I
agree.
think it's a
I
good
agree.
idea to drop the commission chair requirement.
Yeah,
I did, yeah.
and that way we don't have to have it in
Right.
open.
And
Okay.
I just want to register my opposition to the idea that we have commissioners identified with individual council members. That suggestion from Mr. Daddy and others. I think that fosters a sense of fractionalism that is not healthy. That commissioner is, Paul's commissioner, that's Johnny's commissioner. I don't think that's healthy. And so,
Well, I agree that there is that aspect of it, but the argument in favor and why many communities do it is they say if elections have consequences and people are elected and, you have a particular view that is not being reflected on the planning commission or
understand.
whatever, you have an ability, it's only one of 5, so you have an ability to start
Yeah.
steering it a little bit. It's a little bit like Supreme Court
Yeah.
appointments. You can
Well,
make a
if
big
you-
difference
Well,
over
and
time.
it hasn't been uncommon in the past. I can remember.
No, it hasn't been
I can remember when I first was on the planning commission and I was sitting next to Joe McAllister. And I said, Joe, how did you ever get on the planning commission? She says, well, I was Jim Lobel's campaign manager.
well,
So he appointed me as soon as he was elected.
well, I would further point out, if we go in that direction, we really have to standardize at 5.
Yeah, well, that
Yeah,
would be
you'd
part of
have
the
to.
benefit of that too. And then you eliminate a whole lot of this stuff, and it is a reflection of whatever the voters and whatever the issues were in the campaign. But again, that part can't really be done, well, actually, nothing apparently could be done tonight other than giving direction to staff. But I don't, should I make a motion on the leniency or the flexibility on the way in which we do the interviews? I think, Bill's idea of what, the chairman doesn't have
Right.
to sit in, that would get us around the Brown Act, right? Or so that we can give some confidentiality to the candidate? Yes.
One thing I want to mention before the council gave any direction or made a motion, I know that we did get one speaker card that was turned in. Also want to very quickly, while I had the mic, just a couple clarifications. We do not televise or record the interviews. So I just want to let you know, but they have been open to the public. And yeah, that was a practice of a past mayor in terms of inviting the other applicants in. That practice has not continued. It has been our position that because it's open to the Brown Act, that they could, if they wanted to, come in and sit and be part of that, but we have not, and the committees have not been extending that to the current applicants.
Okay, so, anybody got a motion?
We recommend taking the public comment before you make a motion.
Do I what?
We recommend taking the public comment card
Oh, yeah, okay.
before
Okay,
motioning.
Okay. We have a speaker card. Dale, come on down.
Dale's my candidate.
You're my
Good
candidate, too.
evening. About the 5 member commissions, I think that's a good idea, although I really don't like the idea of losing Kathy Nolan on the planning commission. But at any rate, I think it's a good idea. The only thing is, I think that the Art Commission and the Parks and Rec, they cover a much broader area. And I really think that maybe having 7 for those would be a consideration. I mean, Park and Recs go all over the valley, do they not? It serves the entire valley. I mean, there's preference to city, but, and the Art Commission, I mean, we've got artists all over the place, so I think having 7 members for that would be good. The other thing is that it was Carlin, that, at least that as I recall, was the first one that had the interviews right here, and the members of the city was invited. We could come and ask questions, and that may not be a good way for the people being interviewed, but it was good for us to see who might sit on different commissions. So I don't know if that's a consideration, but it was helpful for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. Okay,
Do we need Mayor, do we need a motion, or do we just need direction?
well, if we have,
Because they're
by
coming back.
consensus, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Well, okay, so,
That's okay. because you're not taking action tonight. You're
Right.
telling us how to edit it.
Okay, so do we sort of have consensus on Bill's thought of the, as far as the chairs? I would support that.
Minus the chairs.
Yeah, just have two members and we
Two
rotate.
council members, the mayor's choice, the mayor and the mayor's choice. Well, liaison maybe, but
Yeah,
still the mayor's
yeah, I
choice.
would think the liaison, if we're going to continue having that designation, that would
The
be.
mayor and the liaison.
That would be sort of the logical person at the time, although it's only for a 3-month period, but.
I think that helps, especially when the awkwardness of the
Yeah,
commission chair is one of the applicants. It's-
okay, and then it doesn't.
And then you don't have to have Brown Act and, you know.
Right, it relieves the mayor of not being thought of as manipulating the committee of interviewees. It would just.
One of the perks of the office, right?
Well, I know, I'm willing to give that up. But thank you. Okay. Okay, and that,
May I add something? You know, there could be a council member who has a special interest or a special, like an art, there could be a council member who's an artist. I mean, do we have to have all of that written in stone?
I
who the
don't
second
suppose we
person
have
is?
to.
More than
Well,
two-
you can't
more than
have,
two,
you can't have three without
No,
having
I'm
that
not saying
right.
3, but can't the mayor and amongst ourselves decide?
Oh, sure.
Or if someone requests, does that all have, yeah, what if there's an architect on the council and he, or whatever? Are you saying the current liaison and the mayor, is that what you're
right,
agreeing
and
to?
then everything, well, that.
Because
well,
we've all been liaisons to all the
Well,
commissions.
the mayor's traditionally has kind of controlled the interview process. That's why it's
Yeah,
changed,
just let the
because the
mayor-
mayors have wanted different
Okay.
styles, you know?
It
You
isn't
wanna make
controlling
trouble.
much,
It
it's,
keeps it simple.
yeah.
It keeps
You
it
know,
simple.
But, okay, the idea, I think, what you suggest is perfectly acceptable to me, but I think keeping it simple is that we have this rotation, but it's not hard and fast. If somebody were to say,
Okay.
I really would like to participate when the
Then you
vacancy
just-
comes up, if nobody has a problem
Yeah.
with it,
Okay.
I think you could
most
say that
people
it's
would
going to be
happy
the
to
mayor,
trade.
the mayor and the current liaison, unless the mayor
Or otherwise
decides,
designated by
Okay,
the
is
okay.
mayor.
otherwise
That's otherwise-
designated by the mayor.
Perfect,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then that solves the other issue of whether or not it's a public parade of the candidates that,
Right.
and maybe that'll help them, help more people decide they want to take a shot at it. Okay, am I missing anything on that, clerk? Is that pretty well taken care of? Okay. So what else did we have, Randy? I can't remember what the other question
Well,
was.
go to our second one here, and that's the time and location and length of regular meetings. I think that'd be
Oh, yeah,
one
okay.
to talk about.
Mr. Mayor, in regard to that, I have some comments at the appropriate time about the order of the meeting, too.
Of the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Uh,
we're talking about the time now?
The time, let's see, when it says location, oh, that's just the heading, right?
Right.
And the other thing that, my thought is, we meet at 6 frequently. We then have a council meeting that starts at 7. It's supposed to be a business meeting. Unless there's a public hearing, we should be able to easily get through that in 2.5 hours. And we wouldn't even have to if it was a 9:30 target, if we use the same process that we have been using, where the manager says, it's getting close to the cutoff. Is there anything that's dragging that we really have to deal with? And then we end up spending another half hour or 45 minutes. We're still here till about 10 or 10:30 doing the manager's report, the council report. It just seemed like when we targeted at 10:30, there's a tendency for us to just kind of ramble a little and let it go. And then the people who are paying attention at home or sitting in the audience, we wear them out. If we really want to encourage people to participate, both in the audience and running for office, shorter meetings, I think, would be greatly welcomed by most people. So I would propose that we go to the 9:30 and then follow the same way of kind of stopping the clock at 9:25. We need to introduce a couple more bills. So.
I have an opposite view. As much as I'd love to get out of here at 9:30, it seems to me that, first of all, the way the agenda is organized and the efficiency of the meeting are intimately connected. I think we should organize the agenda so that items that are of the greatest interest to the public or carryover items are first. And I have I've just noticed that we don't abide by the 10:30 cutoff date, but we do that little trick if we want to get through something. So why have an artificial cutoff date if there's an option of, there's time-sensitive things, of putting them, that's what we do.
Yeah,
We
but you
don't-
saw
we
the
don't-
confusion we got into when there was some, I'm not quite sure, but, Randy, I think you thought that the water coordinator should be moved up. I think you were the one that went last meeting, to try to move it up because we had people in the audience, and I think,
Yeah, I
did
wanted
I have
to do
that right,
that.
or did?
I like things organized.
Finish what
Oh,
the
sorry.
problem was, then
Sorry.
we'll go to that. And then I thought, and was it Bill, were you the one that thought that, well, let's don't reorder it if we only got a couple people in the audience that want to talk? And then that's what we got. We got two hands, and the next thing you know, people were playing tag team and streaming in, and then that gave you and you were
I
understandably
predicted that.
confused, yeah, right? Paul could have predicted it because he's
Yeah.
had, so I absolutely guarantee I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'll make others. But that is a problem. And so I think that the rule should be that when we approve the agenda, we should do like we do, and that is move something up if there's a greater importance for it and the majority of the council agrees with it. One of the problems is we have agendas sometimes that really don't have to have all the items on it, but we've kind of agreed to let items be placed on it to just get the subject started, and then we get into the council meeting and stuff, we don't reach everything. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, the other thing, the reason I wanted to talk about this is when I was running the meetings, it became very frustrating when we could have an hour and a half of public comment before we even got to an agenda item. And now people, and we saw it last time particularly, people are coming up in public comment to talk about agenda items, and then they're coming back up on agenda items to talk about the agenda items. So what I had done, and I'm not suggesting that because I think we should do it differently, I had only the first half hour of the meeting for public comment, which gave 10 people 3 minutes. And believe me, after the first couple meetings, we had no more public comment than that. And then had the rest of the public comment at the end of the meeting, and there was never anybody here. Another way to do it so that we don't get them double dipping is to have public comment after some agenda items. If, let's say, we have 3 agenda items that are really important, or 4 agenda items that are really important, you're going to find that people are going to talk on those agenda items, and then if we do the public comment after that, there's hardly going to be any public comment. Because most of the time, I'm noticing more and more that people are double dipping. They're talking in the first part under public comment, and then they're also talking about the agenda item at the time of the agenda. And I think that could save us a lot of time. All it takes is 15 people at 3 minutes, and right there you got 45 minutes.
Or longer, because
Yeah,
there's
and that
get
could-
up and get down
And that
time.
could be longer than it's going to take us to discuss an important agenda item.
Right.
Oh, I think you make a good point. I don't disagree with that at all. What's the feeling of
Well,
Randy?
after watching some of the county hearings and meetings, it's interesting how they, maybe because they're longer, but they actually do the same thing. They prioritize, starting, I think, at 11:30, and they do their first 4, the most important items that are on they've all agreed to that they're gonna discuss. Then they take public comments. Then what they do is then they actually have a designated time where they'll review another, maybe a public hearing that starts at 1 o'clock, but it's over at a specific time.
Yeah, well, that's what they said on the agenda, but as a practical matter, they go into closed sessions. They started like last week when they had one item that was at a special time. It didn't even start for an hour and a half after that.
Well-
So but yeah, there are things we could do.
So that's what I wanted to finish with is what we might be able to do is, first of all, agree that the city manager and the mayor set the agenda by a certain date, that agenda is then sent out to council, that we all agree on what those first 3 or 4 priorities are. We've all known that, it's all set. We do those 4 first, or those 3 first, whatever we want to do. Then we go to public comment, and then we finish up the evening with 3 more. And we don't put any more than 3 discussion items on the front end and nothing more than 4 on the back end so that staff's not getting overworked. If we know the last 3 or 4 of the packet are not the most important, then if we don't get to them, we know that they're gonna roll over into the next council session. But the most important thing is that we review and that we all make a consensus, is these are the most 7 important issues facing the council for that night.
You mean under agenda review?
Yes, and then we don't get caught up into council people piggybacking and trying to throw more on. That we've got we've already agreed that this is the 7 that are gonna be on it. We're not gonna have any more, and that sets the agenda. And I think that's,
Okay, so your suggestion, and I guess going along with what Paul's saying, is you don't necessarily even have public comment at the beginning, do it in the middle after we've taken care of a little of the business, then go to public comment, and then come back at the end if there's
Yeah,
some reason.
exactly.
Yeah, okay, I think that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
That's,
In a possible hybrid, if, everybody else wants the 9:30 to be in the code, is it, overflow public comment could come in after the cutoff for deliberation. In other words,
Yeah.
after the 9:30.
it could, although we never had any overflow.
Well, people
If you
don't wanna
remember.
wait till 9:30.
You know,
Well,
public
except
public comment's important, and it's very important if
hello
somebody
there.
wants to stick around. But once I set that half an hour, first of all, our number of speakers cards for public comment went way down, and sometimes we didn't even have 10.
Yeah.
And we never had anybody that stuck around to the end of the meeting for public comment.
I'm just, every once in a while, there's something like, don't you remember the cell tower fiasco? Things can bloom. And you want to have the
So you're saying
opportunity.
if we had the target earlier and not, and then have the second round of public comment right along with what we would be doing in our reporting and stuff.
Yeah.
That could be more of a.
Right.
Yeah, it wouldn't be for action particularly.
Right.
It'd just be to listen.
Right, if the intense interest was there.
and we're also starting, we're gonna start at 6 and end at 9:30. I think something else that has to be reintroduced right after public comments is commission chair reports. Because we've dropped that ball, and that's a very important ball to hear from the commissioners. So I'd like to see that brought back in and included in that second half of the agenda.
At the end, like when we give our reports?
Could be then, could
That's
be,
fine,
yeah.
Yeah, I think there was sort of a little misunderstanding. The fact that it's not listed, it did not deny anybody anything, but there was some confusion the last meeting that I went back and watched the video, and we tried to explain it 3 different times, and everybody got more than their 3 minutes apiece, but it was confusing, and I think that's what we got to get rid of.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
I tend to like the idea of having agenda items first and then
yeah.
public comment.
I'm different, maybe because I'm the woman on the council. I love the public comment. I welcome it, and I think it can be reined in. I mean, you don't have to agree. You're the majority. I'm just expressing, I like the idea maybe of dividing it up. And I thought it was always a rule that a person cannot speak during public comment on an item that's on the agenda. I thought that was a hard,
It is.
fast rule.
It is a hard, fast rule, but people do it anyway.
Well, then it's up
And when
to
I
us
was
to
mayor, one of
stop
the
them
things that
or
I would do
inform them.
is I would stop somebody in the middle of their public comments saying, you need to come back and talk about that at the agenda item. But even just doing that itself took time.
Well, I think maybe we have to make that very, very clear at the beginning of the meeting, somehow.
Well, in this case, we made it clear that there was an exception to be
Yeah,
a courtesy to a couple of people, and
Right.
that was.
We are never
you
going
can't-
to do,
Once you cross that line, you're dead.
unless it's a woman who's about to give birth or some emergency, okay?
Here's
If
one
that's the
other-
case, they shouldn't be here.
Here, I think, is one other aspect of public comment. What the public wants, one, is to be heard, and the public wants to know when they're gonna be heard. So it doesn't matter whether it's at 6 o'clock or it's at 8 o'clock. If we say we're gonna do public comment at 8 o'clock, it starts at 8 o'clock. That way individuals
How
can
you're gonna-
prepare. If we say we're gonna do it at 6, we do it at 6, they're here, they're prepared. But from my experience, speaking publicly, first of all, scares the daylights out of you. But more importantly, I just wanted to know when I had to be there. And second of all, I needed to know how much time I had. So it was real clear. It started at the beginning of the meeting, and the council session, and I had 3 minutes. If someone isn't prepared, no matter what the time is, and isn't prepared to speak for their full 3 minutes, that's on them, that's not on us. But I just feel that it's important that the public know when they're gonna be heard.
Yes, I agree.
Doesn't matter whether it's in the beginning, the middle, or the end.
I don't know how you can predict the time if it's in the middle.
Well, one of the, well, if you were to just set it as a time certain, and we would agree that barring some extraordinary situation, we
Okay.
would just suddenly say, well, we'll table this temporarily and go to the public comment. I think one of the advantages maybe of having the public comments later is that we have the rule that you need to have your cards in before public comment, then we can divide that into the time allocated and decide whether it's 2 or 3 minutes, and then everybody stays with that. And then it's still hard to drop the gavel on them sometimes, depending on who it is, and, they've come a distance to help us. But, yeah, I think that would be an improvement.
I think it would save time.
Okay,
Let's hear from the public.
That's,
Do we have any more cards, or?
Anyone want to speak on this?
I have comment on the card. Can I write on the last card?
Speaking of, huh?
This is the reason.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, we'll send out more.
But I'm speaking on the
invitations.
item, though.
Well, we got a lot more to go through
Yeah, I
on this.
suppose I wanted to talk
Go ahead,
about.
Dale.
I just wanted to say about presentations, I don't know if you've discussed that yet, but sometimes these presentations, though they're valuable and they're good information, they go on and on. And I think a person giving a presentation should be told in advance, you've got, I don't know, 5, 10, whatever it is, but they've gone on sometimes so long. And that really starts the meeting late, so that would be my suggestion.
yeah.
That's a good point. We
And that's
can-
in here, it says
Yeah,
10
we-
minutes.
Yeah, we say 10 minutes unless we're going to just give on discretion, give them a little extra time. But I guess we have to keep, maybe read the script at the beginning of each meeting to keep reinforcing to people what the rules are going to be, because otherwise everybody comes in and comes dashing up, gives the card to Gail, and okay, so, Steve.
Very quickly, one, it sounds like I'm hearing that there's support from the council that if whatever we do with the public comment period, that it have a fixed time limit, at least for the initial time to take public
Yeah.
comments, okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to note, just for council, one advantage that we do have right now, having the public comment early on, well, we need to allow at some point in the agenda the opportunity for members of the public to comment on items on the consent calendar. Currently, right now, we have them fill out a speaker card and have them speak under the public comment section when it's something on the consent calendar. So
Right, well,
we would just have to have a
Right, my
process
other
for that.
comment, and I was going to bring it up, is that we do the consent calendar after we get through those first initial.
Oh, there
We
you
don't Do
go.
the consent calendar in the beginning.
Could be later, yeah.
Could be later.
Have that after the public comment.
After the first
period.
public
We'll
comment.
have it
After
after
the
we.
first high priority
first-
items.
First or second priority items, then we have the consent calendar or the public comment,
Yeah.
and then we do the consent calendar after
And then
that.
get back to the other items.
And then get back to the agenda again.
Okay, are you
Okay.
getting that?
Yeah, I guess the only suggestion that I would have would be maybe if you're going to go that route, that you do the public comment before the consent calendar. That way you give that opportunity for people if they want
Right,
to
that's
speak
what I'm
on.
saying.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
yeah, that's.
That's exactly what I
I
said.
misunderstood. I thought you were
But
saying
we
do
do
the
the
consent.
consent calendar in the middle of the meeting rather
Understood.
than in the beginning.
Okay,
Okay.
so we would take the 3 business items, we would then have public comment, find a definite period, we'll divide the cards into the definite period, and then we will have the consent immediately following that, so anybody who wanted to
Right.
speak on that would have their chance, okay? That
But
sounds like.
what about this, what did you're not suggesting we start at 6 PM on a regular basis, are you?
No, not at all. I'm just
Okay.
saying we do it like we're doing now, and sometimes we're here 5 and 6 hours, and I'm sure you can watch some of the video.
I
We're not
am.
very
Okay.
good
I'm
after
recommending
about
that we
10.
start at 6. I don't want to give up 1 hour of the people's business. I thought the deal was 6 to 9:30, or 7 to 10:30, but I'm not interested in 2-hour council meetings.
Yeah, okay, so we're not, there was talk about some 9:30, we're not agreeing to that, are we?
No, that was a
Okay,
suggestion.
it was just a suggestion, okay. Bill Miley wants to speak. So what happens to, I want to be really clear on this notion of a cutoff date. I don't know when that started, because I don't see any point in all of a sudden making us nervous at 10:25 because we haven't gotten to something. What is the point of a cutoff date when we can have a cutoff date because we agree on it, but why, we can't?
No, you have to go to the very end of the agenda if you don't have a protocol for the time you're going to stop. And we were here till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes.
Unless there's consensus to continue whatever's left at the end of the agenda, that would be an option. But it becomes if you don't have a defined cutoff time, then it requires a consensus each time to continue what is decided to be worthy of continuing as opposed to considering. I can't speak, though, to when the 10:30 rule was put in. I believe it was a little while ago, though.
Okay, so you're saying we have the option, if we agree amongst ourselves, to continue items 7, 8 till the next meeting. We have that option.
That option is always on the table, yes.
Okay, so clarify for me why we need a hard, a cutoff date,
It's not a
Cutoff
date, you
time.
mean a time, yeah.
cutoff time.
To keep the thing, let the public know and to keep the thing from wandering on all night long. And they have the flexibility when there are some minor things that have been on the agenda, that like the city manager might have something that has to do with the League of California Cities, and it was put at the end of the agenda thinking that it was not, but it was time sensitive. So when it's by time sensitive, it means it needed to be acted on, like the op-ed piece that we were asked
Yeah, I
to
understand.
sign on. That when those things come up, we would have the flexibility to be able to reach those rather than calling it, continue the meeting to the next day to get to it. So I don't,
Okay, so there is a practical
yeah, there is.
purpose.
There is. And we
Even
should-
though we can, not abide by it.
Well, you're abiding by it, you're just using that as give some flexibility. We don't always do it.
Okay, if you guys are fine with it.
Yeah, it,
Okay.
you don't have to do it.
I can, it was, the 10:30 cutoff was put in the first term of my mayor, when I was mayor. And it was because we were here till 2 o'clock in the morning, some meetings.
But that was
Because we had to get through the agenda, and nobody wanted to make a motion to continue it.
Well, the city attorney just said that you could have, you didn't have to do that.
Oh, no, you don't have to do anything, but the council didn't want to stop.
Well, it's
But
not-
the point too is if you have a
Council
cutoff date
didn't-
in the municipal code, okay, then you have to abide by it unless you go through the process of changing the code.
Right.
That's a much higher bar than just deciding, in the meeting, freewheeling how you want to go. It's a form of imposing discipline on the process.
Right, but this is a half step between code, and statute.
Yes.
But it does give, like you say, it's a disciplining the process and giving a target. Otherwise, I don't go home and watch them all the time, but when I do, and it gets past about 10:30, we're laughing and scratching and then
Well-
we're not really making, thinking really well, or,
And think of it at 1 o'clock in the morning or
yeah, right.
1:30.
it's really
Imagine how,
Okay, my
if some of those decisions were still haunted with,
slap
right?
happy, they used to call that.
That's right. And people like Bill Miley were still here, in the audience.
Oh, he's the problem, right?
Okay, and while Bill, you're a little
And
tardy
Dale,
on
too.
this, but come on up and give us the quick version, the abridged, the Reader's Digest. What can you?
For the record, Bill Miley. I heard the city manager say relative to unscheduled public comments, time limit. And the limit is the thing that I heard. I thought it was going to be designated time certain. Then there's the second question, which is you're going to place a limit on the time that the public can comment under the time certain agenda item.
Yeah, it's like 8 to 8:30, take the comments, and then come back.
There's 20 people who want to make comments under public, under schedule. You're going to let that happen?
No.
Or you're going to limit it to 45 minutes and then maybe put it at the end
Wow.
like you've been discussing?
I don't, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I don't think that we're going to be faced necessarily with that when we do it in the middle of the meeting. I think that a lot of the public comment time is taken up by people that really are talking about agenda items. And they're not going to come up the second time after they've talked the first time. That's just my experience.
The other comment I have is that I think the 10:30, no new agenda items after 10:30 benefits the public too, because they get tired, just like the mayor just said. And they're liable to drift off. And maybe a council in the future are not responsible like you folks, and they put the most important item at 12 o'clock. Nobody's here. So I think that's a really good idea to have that 10:30.
Okay, so are you saying, are we done with that part?
Yeah,
With this
fine.
part? Or city manager? So as far as the order of the agenda, were you suggesting what, I didn't understand that. We get our agenda on Wednesday night. Are you suggesting before it's fixed in stone and posted publicly that we, what?
Yeah. Didn't say that.
Okay.
That had been suggested by the mayor pro tem. Unfortunately, the council emailing back and forth about structuring the agenda would not be a lawful approach. As
we
much as
still-
it would be much more efficient and probably more effective, it wouldn't comport with the Brown Act.
And we still have an opportunity to approve the agenda the night
Yeah,
of the
and
meeting.
that's the way it's got to be.
You know, I really think that the mayor and the city manager take the top three, and we can always rearrange it if we think it's important the night of the meeting.
Yeah,
Exactly.
except for
And-
some people get upset because then they plan that it's, but that can't be helped. I don't think there's a way around that.
And that last point does bear a little bit of emphasis, that in the end, the agenda for each meeting is controlled by the council at that meeting. It can always be adjusted.
Right.
Not adding, given the Brown Act, but within it, adjusting is possible.
But, and what Susan's saying, I think, is we should keep in mind when we if we feel the need to reorder the agenda, it should be for good cause, because otherwise these two people will come and wait, and then, you know, they discover that their item got bumped, you know. So, yeah, I think, but I agree with Paul. I think that if we do this where we take the 2 or 3 key items up first, we then go to public comment, we then go to consent agenda, chances are there won't be a whole lot more. There'll be a second shot, a bite of the apple at the end of the meeting. I think that should,
I think it'll work fine.
Mayor Johnson? I'm not going to start anything new, I promise. It's almost time to adjourn for the next meeting. But I do have 2 pages of comments on the protocols.
oh, okay.
And I'm wondering if the best way to do this is to either hand them out now or just email them with no reply to everyone. I just have further
Yeah,
thoughts.
well, if you have them, is there any problem with handing them out so we can study it before we?
No, that's fine.
Okay,
And if the public wishes to read them, a copy is available at the clerk's office.
okay. 1, 2.
Maybe we should let the public know that the regular meeting hasn't
Got one to
started
go.
yet.
Yeah.
I wanted to go.
I made 8 copies. So, anyway, there's some substantive issues I'm raising with respect to approving agendas and talking about things, but way beyond anything we have time for. And I just wanted to get it out there, that I have some issues.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so we're done with this for tonight. And if necessary, we'll have another meeting about the protocol.
Right, yeah, okay, so you and Gail have some notes on what we've talked about so far tonight and get a sense of, and then we'll need to study Bill's input, and
Yeah.
then we'll schedule another, why don't we schedule another workshop whenever,
Okay.
before the council meeting, and then put it on the council agenda.
So we can
if
act.
we're ready, so we can act at that
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
and get this taken care of.
Yeah.
You got it, Mr. Mayor,
Okay,
thank you.
that's
This was
good.
really good, thank you.
Yeah.
It was important.
And I want to commend the staff, Gail in particular, for the format and
Yeah,
the
it's
way,
excellent.
it really is.
It really is
A lot easier to
excellent.
read it.
Yeah, thank you, Gail.
Yes, great work,
It's a
Gail.
good document.
Okay, then I'm going to adjourn the workshop, take a 5-minute break, and then we'll start the regular meeting, okay?